Good morning, everyone out there in YouTube land. Mr. Businessman here for your Friday stream. All these days are starting to feel like the same day, aren't they? Just over and over and over. And I decided to treat you a little bit today because I thought, you know what? I don't do enough for my stream. I don't do enough for my very loyal viewers. So I thought I'd wear a sort of shirt and sort of be a bit more summery for you today. So I found this. It's kind of like it looked like something that I might be a drug cartel leader or something by the looks of things, or something off Vice City. But I think it suits me. Don't ask me about it. But yeah, it's all right, innit? So I hope I find you well. I hope I find your family well. I hope I find your friends well. I hope you are abiding by the various things that we're supposed to. And hello to the people in the future who are watching this who says that, that Mr. Businessman doesn't have to talk about the lockdown a lot, doesn't he? Well, this is being filmed during that's why. But yeah, so be pretty cool. Anyway, we've got lots to do today. Not got a massive topic to hit. And I found that we've come to the bit of the spec really where there's a lot of little bits, lots of little like little bits of theory that aren't massive but are really important. So some of these probably over the next couple of days in terms of into next week and next week's streams are going to be slightly shorter than usual, only for the fact of it seems silly for me to keep going on and on and on about things which you don't need to really add anything else to. So I won't do that. I won't purposely, just keep going on about them just to fill the time. The time thing that we sort of set ourselves is purely for just a having amount of detail that's really needed. But if it's not needed, I'm not going to waste time. I'm not going to waste your time by doing it. I'll waste your time instead by sitting here chatting to you at the start of the stream. But I think you can afford me. What is it? 2 minutes, 3 minutes at the start of the stream, just to say good morning and welcome back. Now, so we're going to get straight in. What we're going to talk about today is added value. You will know if you saw the title of the stream. And added value is a topic which, again, as I said, it's not a massive topic, but it's quite an important topic. It's one of the core sort of concepts in business, actually, that we don't. It's strange how much we just take it for granted. We assume people know. A lot of people don't really know how to add it up, and it can be the difference between you making money and making a loss, essentially, in the or rather making a profit or loss in any kind of business, any any product, any service, and people don't spend enough time, especially at the start of when they're coming up with the business ideas, actually writing these things into the business plan and thinking about the various options. So it's a bit of we haven't done break even on the stream yet, but it's a bit of really it works really well with what we call what if analysis and what if scenarios, because we can kind of look at various options that are available to us and sort of play with the numbers to make sure that it actually works out to the level of profit that we want to be, satisfying stakeholders and things like that. So it's not to be underestimated, added value, because it is something that's really important and something that you can't really avoid, especially if you want to be successful business people. So let's get into it then. So what is the price of coffee? It says at college here, if you're at college, what is the price at college? What is the price at, the what's it called, actual cost of coffee, because that's quite a big difference, isn't it, in terms of the amount that you'd spend that'd be different on that. So let's say, for argument's sake, let's say it's about $2.50. All right, so what's the price? It's probably about $2.50, isn't it? Now, what would it cost to make your own coffee? So we've probably got a tablespoon of coffee, 5p, shot of milk, 2p, boiled water, 1p, tablespoon of sugar, 1p, total of 9p. Okay, so we've got quite a big significant difference between your 9p that you could potentially make this product for if you wanted to make a like-for-like product, and the cost of coffee at $2.50. So how much more is that? That's well, it'd be, if it was 100 times more, it would be £9, wouldn't it? So that'd be just over 30 times more. That'd be right, wouldn't it? Yeah. So just under 30 times more, probably about 26, 27 times more to buy it from Costa. So why is it then that people are willing to go out of their way, or willing to, spend more on Costa? And a big part of this comes from a couple of different things. Number one is brand. Okay, we've already done marketing. We already talked a lot about marketing and about how important branding images is. Or rather are, and the sort of quality aspect to it in terms of that. Like I said right at the start, then I said to make a like-for-like cup of coffee, and I think a lot of people who buy Costa coffee would argue that it isn't like-for-like because they're getting something different. So actually, the product offering is bigger than just a piece of coffee in a cup, isn't it? What you're actually buying is you're buying convenience, you're buying access to a brand, you're buying how you will look, the perception of people seeing you with that product in terms of you're carrying the Costa Coffee cup round, that kind of stuff. You are buying that. You are also buying the quality assurance that you get from buying, a good, well-branded, expensive for a coffee product. So we've got that psychological pricing that comes into it as well, haven't we? Where you are associating quality and price together, so that the more expensive it is, the better quality it is, which isn't necessarily true. There is no reason to think that, although we do, don't we? We assume, right, well, if it's more expensive, it's probably better quality. They're probably using better stuff. They're probably using more... I don't know, better quality of coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker really, but it's a plant, isn't it? A coffee plant. So I don't know how particularly good quality that plant can be, but yeah. But a lot of it's convenience as well, isn't it? A lot of it is that idea that you're out and about, and unless you get up early in the morning and spend the time actually making a coffee and going out with the coffee, and make sure that you are prepared for the day, which isn't a bad, way to be anywhere. But a lot of people don't have the time or the inclination to bother doing that, and they like Costa Coffee. Now, the alternative would be then the argument of, right, well, okay, just aside from added value, how much added value could you justify adding on to this, essentially, to make up for convenience, to make up for brand, to make up for quality assurance and psychological feelings that the consumer is going to get from that product, how it's going to make the person feel, how it's going to make the the feeling of walking around with that product, how much is that worth to them. And to some people it's worth a hell of a lot, to some people it's worth less, but you have to figure that out yourselves, really, don't you, when you're doing your planning, when you're looking at your market research, looking at your demographics. How much can we justify, how much can this product reasonably be sold for and people still buy it? So we've got that sort of aspect to it as well, haven't we? Now, we've got the question at the bottom here is why would you pay the difference, or would you pay the difference? I think is the first question, because us as business people, we can't assume that people are going to pay that difference. We've got to be sensible about planning our added value, planning our it comes down to pricing, doesn't it? Then it comes down to whether you're going to do different types of pricing, and whether you're going to go for a luxury market, or whether you're going to go for that inferior product market, or whatever it is that you're going to do. Because although we talked about inferior products the other day, although with inferior products, they are the unbranded ones, they are the slightly lower down the chain things, it doesn't mean that they're not fit for purpose. It doesn't mean that they are not good quality to an extent. So keep that in mind. All businesses, no matter, it doesn't even matter if they are the most branded thing in the world, or the least branded thing in the world, they're still going to need that added value. If you don't have added value, then realistically you're not going to be making much of a profit. Excuse me, I got an itchy nose again. So let's go on, if it'll work. So these are what we're going to have a look at today. So let's explain what is meant by added value, calculate some added value, explain ways of increasing value added, and evaluate the importance of added value to a business and its stakeholders. I've written out an answer at the end as well, so we can have a little look at that and go in depth a little bit with the past paper question. So let's have a look at this. So, little example here for you. We've got our inputs, we've got our processes, we've got our outputs. We're trying to build a table here. We've got our raw materials, our inputs. We've got our wood, £20. We've got our brackets, £2. We've got screws, 50p. Paint, £1. Varnish, 50p. That gives us a grand total of inputs of 24 quid, or £24. Then we've got our processes. We've got our cutting, sanding, joining, painting, varnishing, actually the physical process that we're going to go through doing it. And that gives us an added value. We're actually going to add £80 worth of added value to that. So we start with our 24 by us physically going through the process of cutting, sanding, joining, painting, varnishing, where the skill comes into it. Then we add that much value, don't we? In which case we've transformed wood, bracket, screws, paint and varnish to a usable table, a finished product that people will be willing to spend perhaps £80 more for. So we add them up, get you £104 price that you could sell that for. Now, the important thing to remember about these is that it's the skill that goes into it, isn't it? But that doesn't mean that products that have a lot of skill versus not that much skill will necessarily have the same added value, because there are other things that we've already talked a little bit about, brand convenience and stuff like that people really care about. You know, like you might be able to put a massive premium on this, aside from the cutting, sanding, actually the physical. This is a very sort of this is an example, is a very honest sort of way of doing added value, that you're quite honest about how much it's cost you to do it. You've reasoned out how much time or effort or skill that's gone into the actual production of the product, and you've added the value in terms of that. Most products are not going to be done like that. Most products are also going to take into account brand and things like that, because we can really, really bring those process prices down because of economies of scale, in terms of not just purchasing economies of scale, but managerial qualities of scale, education economies of scale, and things like that. We can benefit from those things if we're a big company, and we can offset that. So we might not actually end up spending that much on the processes, and we can still charge that finished product price of 104. So for us as a company, what we need to be spending time doing is figuring out how we can minimize our costs, maximize our revenue. In this case, how do we justify adding more value to it to push that price up of 104 pounds for the table, which would be very reasonable for a table. That'd be quite cheap, actually. I think we spent about £400-500 on our kitchen table. It's not a cheap thing. I was surprised at how expensive it is, to be honest. So a carpenter buys the materials for 24. He uses varnishing, cutting, joining, and he adds £80 of value. Why is this not £80 profit? Okay, so this comes down to your understanding of profit, doesn't it? Now, we've got two different types of. Let's just do a little recap on profit. Do you remember profit, what it is? So it's the money that's left over once you've paid all your costs, from your revenue, isn't it? So it's the money that we're actually trying to receive. There's two different types of profit, isn't there? If you remember the two different types, there's gross profit. Gross profit's when you've taken off your cost of sales, but you haven't taken off your other costs. And net profit, which is true profit, where you. That's the actual final number that we use as our true profit, that can be reinvested into the business, that can be given away as dividends, that can be taken as drawings, that can be shouted about in terms of the quality and things like that of the profit. Net profit is what people are bothered about. So in terms of improving profit and the amount of profit, if you remember, we've got two different ways of working that out as well, haven't we? We've got our normal one where you've done your total revenue minus your total costs. That gives you your revenue. That gives you your total profit. That would be your net profit once you've taken off all your costs. And then we've also got the contribution method. Do you remember the contribution method? We talked about contribution. It's something that people forget about quite a lot. If you can't remember it, please go back to the contribution stream, because it's so important that you remember that one. People forget about it constantly. I always used to forget about it. In terms of when I was at college and things like that, I always used to forget about this. So what is contribution? If you remember, contribution is the money that's available to pay fixed costs once we've paid off costs that were directly associated with the production of a product. So if we were to have a look at this one and talk about contribution just quickly, it wouldn't take into account things like this would be a good example of direct costs, wouldn't it? Like literally costs that were associated with physically making this product. Quite easy. But if we were to think about, well, what about costs like insurance, like heat, like rent, like salaries, things which can't be associated, marketing campaigns that can't be associated with one product. You can't say, oh, well, the marketing budget just comes off that table. Your salary comes off that table over there just because we saw it. You can't say that. So it would come from a range of different things that the company's doing, wouldn't it? So in terms of that, for your profit, when you're talking about contribution, you've got to think about what is because we know contribution is your revenue minus your cost of sale, which is minus your variable cost essentially. Revenue minus your variable cost, and that'll leave the fixed cost left to pay, won't it? So it's the money that's left to pay that fixed cost once you've paid your variable cost off. All right. So in terms of that, we've got another way of doing profit, haven't we? And quite an apt way for added value, really, because when we're talking about profit, we can say, well, if we know how much money we're actually spending on the products, physically making them, then we can talk about contribution as well, and how fast we're going to be able to do that. So two different types of ways of figuring out your profit. Remember, contribution, your revenue minus your variable costs, that'll give you your contribution. The contribution, therefore, minus your fixed cost will give you profit. So it's another nice way of doing it, and it's something that I just need to get you stuck in your head, because there are two different ways, two distinctly usable ways of figuring out profit. All right, so really, really important for this one, because it's, as I said, it comes down to understanding the importance of added value, really, and why we'd bother doing it. So why is it not profit? That's what we're talking about, wasn't it? Other than my diversion about a little recap on profit. Why is it not profit? Well, it's not profit because they haven't taken into account fixed costs, have they? That's just contribution, essentially. That's why it's not, because you haven't taken into account all those other fixed costs. So that's why I've spent that time doing it, because it directly links to it. It's really, really important that businesses don't underestimate that, because you'd be surprised how many people don't put their own time into things. Like, I don't mean like they don't spend time on things, but they don't write their own time and effort and expenses into the equation, which is crazy, because that completely destroys your added value a lot of the time. If you're saying, well, actually, yeah, I'm going to go and paint that room, and how long is that going to take you? Well, it's going to take me a day. And how much is the paint going to cost you? Well, it's going to cost me £12. And how much of the roller is going to cost you? Or £10. All right, well, that's £22. Yeah, well, I'm going to charge him £50. That'll give me, £28 profit. Well, no, it won't necessarily, will it? It won't necessarily give you £28 profit, because you haven't taken into account your other things that you haven't taken into your own time. So, that there is there's masses of things, isn't there, that you need to take into account, or your insurance, or all the other things. So don't fall into that. As a business person, don't fall into the trap of just looking at it really really, really basically and thinking, oh, well, let's just think about, our variable cost, the stuff that will directly link to the product that we're making, and go off that, because it's much bigger than that. You've got to not forget that. All right. So the difference between the cost of purchasing more materials and the price for which the finished good is sold for, that's what we call added value. So the wood essentially is your first one, isn't it? So how much would your wood be worth to begin with? If you buy some wood for £10 and then you sell the table once it's been done, all that difference to it, for £100, then essentially the added value would be £190, wouldn't it? So it's quite simple to figure out. If you've got the sort of the price of the product that you're selling it for, then you can just do a quick calculation to find out what it is. So let's have a quick go then. All right. So it says here, cost of raw materials for each unit. We've got £20, £4, £10, £9, and then we've got our selling price. Okay. So what we do is, and I've written down here for you, because I mean it's not a maths test, but it's quite simple. So calculating added value is our selling price minus our cost of raw materials. So we've got our selling price here of £130, and then we add up all the other things, 24, 10, 9, that gives us 24, 34. 40, 34, 35? Is that 35? No, it isn't. 20 and 10 is 30, 34, 34, 35, 44, 40, 46, 40, 46. 46, isn't it? 43. 43. It's 43. See, another thing I've been trying to do, and I want you to do this as well. Get into the habit of doing it. Try and do things in your head. Try and figure it out in your head. You know, like I'm out of practice now, but I try when I'm at work, when I'm actually physically doing lessons and stuff. I always try and do things in my mind a lot more because you'd be surprised how much it's a good little workout. You get fast at it. I know that isn't a good example of me doing it then because I'm out of sorts, but you know, usually I'm pretty good at it. So you know, apologies as well. We seem to be having a little issue with stuttering on the stream again. I don't know what it is. I'm gonna have to reset the internet, I think, because it's gonna start stuttering. Unfortunately, though, with this, I'm not gonna cancel the stream today. It's just we're already 21 minutes in. But yeah, I will reset the internet. I don't know why it's this certain time of the day. You know, maybe I need to move this stream slightly so that we can do it. 10 o'clock seems like a good time, though, doesn't it? Anyway, let's keep on. So, adding value can be done in many different ways. So, first of all, we've got to look at it from two perspectives, haven't we? If you want to add value to something, you can reduce your costs or you can add something else to warrant putting the price up, essentially. So you can add more to it or you can take away from the negatives, essentially. So it's the same thing that we talk about all the time. How do you increase profit? Well, you can either increase your revenue somehow or you can reduce your outgoings somehow. It's very simple, isn't it? It's simpler than it sounds to actually physically do. So reducing the cost of inputs, we've got cheaper suppliers, cheaper location, reduced labour costs. Again, really sounds easy, but it's not as simple as that, isn't it? Because if we're producing something, these are the core facets of things that we're worried about. Now, in terms of cheaper suppliers, we've got to then start thinking about quality, haven't we? We've got to think about how is that going to be affecting our quality? How's that therefore going to affect our reputation? How's it going to affect the customer satisfaction? How's it going to affect repeat purchasing and brand image and things like that? So there's a lot to think about with that. But just because it's cheaper doesn't mean it's better, it's worse quality. But the argument would be, well, why is it so cheap? Again, we got back to that psychological pricing. We can't help ourselves, but be connected to that. Cheaper location. Now the location might not be a problem because we might be able to go to somewhere that's in the middle of nowhere. The only issue with that would be customers, suppliers, and employees essentially having access to it. So have we got the infrastructure? Have we got the roads? Have we got the bus lanes? Have we got access to this place? Does it do what we need to do? Does it have access to the natural resources we need? That would be up for, you'd have to have a look at it, wouldn't you, and actually have a look at that. You'd be surprised how many businesses don't actually think about the location. We talked about location a little while ago, but how important it is to the actual decision-making process, especially at the start of when you're making a new business, of thinking, don't underestimate the power of this, don't underestimate how important it is to get a good location. Reduce labour costs. Again, reducing labour costs is always something that businesses try and do. Unfortunately, though, that might lead to bad reputation with unions, things like that. You may have lawsuits on your hands and things like that, or trying to make you look stupid in the press. It depends on the size of the business. Depends on that kind of stuff and whether they've got an axe to grind with you. But also with your labour costs as well, you've got to think, well, are we affecting skill? If we're talking about production, then if it's a very high skilled job, I mean, if it's a production and they're just putting, chocolates in a box or something like that, then yeah, you can just get anybody to do that. You could get a machine to do that. But if we're talking about someone like a carpenter who's making tables and things like that, it's not just as simple as just getting someone to go and to do it, essentially, is it? It's not as simple as that. It's not as you got to be sensible about it and think, right, well, actually, what are we getting from this? What's good value for us as a business as well? Now, increase the perceived benefit of the product in the eyes of the customer, allowing a higher price to be charged. Yeah, that's our other thing. So we can either reduce the price or we can increase the revenue somehow. Increase the perceived brand image. Now, that's going to really be affected by the fact of the location, the convenience, the brand, the the quality that's being put out and things like that. And we've also got things like improve the perceived quality of the product as well, haven't we? So not only the brand, but the physical product. We could do an advertising campaign. We could get it out in terms of trying to make sure people are aware of how good this product is, why it's so good, what the added features are, make it more compatible with other things. It depends on what it is that we're physically doing, isn't it? So we want to be thinking about, why would someone come to you? Is it the kind of is it the if you're just a supplier yourself, if you're making tables and you're not someone like IKEA who sells their own product. But if you think about then you need to be thinking about the retailers that you're concerned with and you're connected to as well, don't you? But if we think about someone like IKEA, the brand of IKEA and how they've managed to do what they've done. The clever thing that IKEA have done is they've managed to create a brand that actually minimises the cost while maximising the perceived quality and the brand image, which is a very, very clever thing they've done. And the way they've done it is they've made things which would usually be a sort of direct cost, in terms of things which could be linked to the sale of a product, like the staff going and physically collecting the product off the shelf and things like that. They've made them into a USP, and they've made them into something like it's a bit nice, it's a bit exciting for people, and people look forward to it. Oh yeah, you go to IKEA and you can get to actually take the things off the shelf yourself. Why is that good? That's annoying to me, but. And when you go to IKEA, there's hardly any staff as well. I always find it difficult to find staff because they're always in the middle of something. They're always busy. Yes, from the business's perspective, fantastically efficient, fantastically, brilliant way of actually doing business, because they are making, untold profits from the fact that they're not getting staff, they're not leaving staff idle. Brilliant capacity utilization, being used all the time, and they've actually made something which would usually require more staff cost and things like that to do, which will going and physically getting products off the shelf. They've made that into a into a like a USP, which I don't know how they've done that, but they have, and it's very impressive. So yeah, there are ways of doing it, essentially, haven't they, with these different things. I know we're talking about furniture, but it's only because we were talking about tables at the start. But you can do it with all different products. I mean, you look at Apple, look at the shops, look at the way that it's the quality, it's the fact that they work together so well, it's the fact of the build quality and things like that. People always talk about that. It's the software that you can use on them and things like that people are so passionate about and are willing to have arguments about and things like that. So, reducing costs, how potential problem increasing. We've talked about these just then, haven't we? But how can you reduce your cost? There's a number of ways of doing it, isn't there? Reduce the price of your rent, reduce the price of your labour costs, reduce the price of your raw materials. We have got the problems of potential quality issues, any issues that we're going to get of, are people be able to get to us, the infrastructure of being able to get to the property and things like that. Are we going to be able to physically justify the reduction of costs in terms of dealing with unions and things like that as well? Potentially, we might have an issue with that. Increase selling price. We can increase the selling price because of a range of things, or we could just decide to increase it. Sometimes the actual physical increasing, if we want to use psychological pricing ourselves, maybe just putting the price up, as long as we can justify it, may positively affect the brand anyway, because we can say, well, look, people will naturally think that this is a good a good deal because it's more expensive than the competitors. It's potentially it is always something to have a think about, isn't it? Okay, so potential problems, though, we've already talked about issues with what if it's not good enough, what if your competitors are better. You are going to be dealing with the consequences of those actions, aren't you, for the foreseeable, and irreparable damage to your reputation if you mess this up. So don't think that you're just going to guarantee to be okay, because you aren't necessarily. So we're going to have a little look at this one now. Okay, so this is something for you to do. You can pause the stream. You can have a little look at it. So this is Steve Sofas Limited. Steve Sofas has the following costs. He has labour costs of £250 per unit. He has raw materials of £100 per unit. His revenue is £500 per unit. 20 items made per week. Calculate the added value per sofa and calculate the total added value. So what I'd like you to do is, feel free to try and do it in your head. It's not hard. It's not really difficult maths or anything. So feel free. But if you need to use a calculator or something like that, it's totally fine as well. Feel free to use that. I'll just give you a second to have a go. Feel free to pause it, because I'm going to go straight on in a second. Okay. So, what have we got here then? Well, if you remember, we've got this is the calculation for it. We've got revenue minus input costs. So we've started with our revenue. We've got our £500. We take off our costs, which is 250 plus 100, because we've got £250 labour costs, and we've got £100 raw materials. That leaves us with £150. So we're talking about an added value of £150 here, aren't we? Now we've got calculate the total added value per week. And that is as we are. Added value times quantity, 150 times 20, that gives us 3,000. Okay. I'm really, really frustrated. I know that to you guys as well, you probably can't even tell them like it matters anyways. It's not like you're, desperately trying to look at my face, but it really, really frustrates me if I'm sticking or lagging or things like that, and I can see it on my desktop thing. I can see it happening. So I apologize. As I said, what I'll do is I'll reset the internet tomorrow before the stream, and then hopefully that will help. I think this is just one of those things that we're going to have to get used to a little bit, though. It just frustrates me because I don't want it being like that. It says that we've dropped about 7% of our frames this stream. It's frustrating. Oh, it'd really aggravate me doing that. But again, we're too far in to worry about it. So I apologise for keep talking about it. That, ladies and gents, it really does bring us up to near the end of the added value stuff, because it's something which, again, it's a really important thing. It's a really important thing in business. It's a really important thing that we do. It's a really important thing that businesses do and spend time doing. But it's a pretty simple concept, really. So I've now done a question here, and we'll have a little look at this question, and then we'll have a look at the news, and then we'll call it for today, because it's not, as I said, it's pretty easy Friday. Hey. Evaluate the importance of added value to a business and its stakeholders. Let's have a think about AOs while we're here. So AOs, we've got evaluate. What AO is that? It's AO4, isn't it? Evaluate is going to have separate. It's going to have two arguments essentially for evaluating something. It's got to have an opinion in there. The importance of added value. Well, if it's got added value in there, we've got to have some AO1, haven't we? Essentially, because we need to explain that thing as well to a business and its stakeholders. I'd be thinking with this one potentially, because what have we got? 10 marks. Evaluate the importance of added value to the stakeholders of Steve Sophos. I'd be saying, right, evaluate as an AO4, the importance of added value. I'd say we could potentially have all the AOs in this one, AO1, AO2, AO3, AO4, or AO1. No, I think we've got them all. I think the only one that's likely to not be in it in this one could potentially be AO3, but I still think that we're going to need it. So yeah, I think all of them in this. Evaluate, which is AO4, the importance, AO3, in terms of added value, importance of added value to the stakeholders of Steve Sophos. You've got AO2, and then, yeah, I think that we've got them all in this one. So let's have a look at it then. So it says, let's go through the answer then. So evaluate the importance. If you remember, I asked you to, if we're going to do a question like this, you've got to think about structure, and the amount of times that I'm telling students to do a plan. Spend a second or two in the exam. It's, you remember, you've got 1.5 times the amount of time for your marks, essentially. So you've got 1.5 minutes on average, 1.5 minutes per mark. So you've got a second. You might be able to pick some marks up on faster questions, essentially. So if you're going, well, actually, I do have an ability to do this because I've picked up some time in an easier question. I did a maths question earlier. I did it really, really quick. So as long as you feel confident that you can do that, that's okay then, isn't it? But it says here, so do your little plan. You're going to have some arguments. If it's a 10 marker, we're probably looking for, potentially 2 positive, 2 negative, and a conclusion. I think I'd be happy with that. So in terms of evaluation for this one, though, we're probably looking at, I'd probably be okay with 4, probably 4 or 5 stakeholders being used. That'd be okay. So you can do, and as I said, and if you want to do 6 or something, you can do, but it's just about getting detail down. I'd rather have detail than anything else. So let's have a look at it. It says, added value impacts on Claire as a supplier. This is Steve Sophos, by the way, we're still talking about. There is some more detail in the book, but let's have a look. It says, Claire as a supplier, if more value is added by reducing the raw material cost, then Claire will come under pressure to reduce her prices. This will reduce her revenue and lower her overall profitability. So we're talking about a supplier to the business here, aren't we? We're talking about the ability for that supplier to be able to make a decent profit themselves and to be able to stay profitable and things like that. Because it's important to remember that, isn't it? If we're putting more added value in ours in terms of we're trying to reduce cost, then we're trying to reduce our or a supplier cost, then they're going to have to take a hit on that, aren't they? Customers are also affected by added value. If Steve decides to increase the selling price of his products in order to increase added value, this may reduce demand for his sofas as they are already an expensive item. Customers may therefore have to seek out more affordable alternatives within the market. So potentially, he might see a negative for that, wouldn't he? His customers are going to be affected. How are they going to be affected? Well, they're going to be affected negatively because of the fact that they're going to have to be paying more for the same price. Managers have bonuses based on profitability targets. The higher the added value per item, the fewer products that will need to be made in order to achieve a profitability target. Therefore, added value may be important in managers achieving targets. It's a good point, isn't it? It could be quite important on them, essentially, when we're looking at our stakeholders, can't we? It could be quite when we're looking at managers' targets and things, this could be quite important, especially if it's directly linked to what you're trying to physically manage. Employees may be affected in terms of wages, as wages are wages are a direct cost. One way of increasing added value is to reduce the labour cost per unit. If workers are paid less for the completion of each sofa, then they will have to increase the work rate in order to achieve a suitable wage, and that will be the difficulty. Is if we're talking about piece rate. If we're talking about wages that are an hourly paid or something like that, then it wouldn't make a difference to them. They'd just suffer, essentially. A couple of last ones. The local community might be affected by added value as part of the cost reduction may include avoiding the social cost of the business's activity. This means that Steve may not be supporting local charities, reduce his waste handling costs, or make other savings which have a negative effect on the local community. He might just be being a bit silly with the his responsibilities as a business owner. Owners and shareholders may be affected as the higher the added value, the higher the profits might be if demand isn't reduced. Remember, price elasticity and income elasticity of demand you can stick in there. As dividends will be paid by profits, it is likely that the higher added value will lead to increased profits, which in turn may increase the dividends for the shareholders, potentially. Remember, we're not going into loads of detail with this. We're simply just saying positives and negatives if we can. We're evaluating it, aren't we? Government may be affected by added value, as an increase in added value may lead to an increase in profits. Demand is unaffected again. As it will lead to an increase in profits, companies such as Steve Sofas will be required to pay more corporation tax, essentially. As a result, the government may be able to pay for more public and merit goods. This will of course, benefit local communities and things. Now, in terms of this, I said at the start, didn't I? I said like 4 or 5, and in terms of these, I've given you a couple more examples. But remember, it's only 10 marks. Don't be crazy with it. As long as you get some good detail down there. And remember what we've done. There's some really nice AO4 that's sprinkled across there. You've got some really nice things across, like when they're saying if demand is unaffected, that's some really nice AO4 because it's bringing you back to the idea of going, well, actually, there is a thing here, isn't there? There is an element of understanding that there is a wider context to it, and that's where the ability of the student to come in, and that's what they're testing, essentially. So really good AO4 there. In conclusion, it's likely that suppliers and workers are most likely to be affected significantly by a low wage cost. Remember, significantly, the significance of the situation. Whereas customers may suffer from increased prices, other stakeholders may be affected in minor ways during the search to increase added value. Okay, so nice little one. Again, just don't go crazy on the amount of examples you give. I think 4 or 5 is more than enough. As long as you are explaining them confidently, it's only 10 marks. So yes, you can do more, but you could equally do less and more detail and talk about the increase the evaluation side of things on that regard. All right. Finally, a little bit of homework for you. If you want to have a go at it, feel free. All right. So choose an industry or a business, do a different one to the person sat next to you. Obviously, it's not going to be one for that fun today, but, a person who you know or whatever. Find some information about that industry, size, scale, value, main competitors. Find a news story about that specific business. Using the article you found, consider the following. So the context of the story, the implications, who is impacted from it. So, and what do you see as possible solutions? So it's a really nice way of testing that exam technique, practicing that exam technique, but in a slightly more fun or at least less laborious way. All right. So I know that I apologise for the stream being sticky today. Again, it's really frustrating me that it's doing this. I'm going to have a look at that, and I don't think it'd be a hardware issue. I think it'll simply be lots of people being on the internet at the same time. But I think when I've looked back on it, I've checked the audio, and usually the audio is fine. So at least you're still getting the actual information. It's not really that important that I keep going and sticking occasionally. But anyway, let's have a look at some business news, shall we? We'll have a look at the BBC News and find out what's going on in the world today for a Friday. Let's have a little look. It says, virus tests now open to millions of key workers. This is an interesting one. I saw this the other day. What does this actually mean? So it says up to 10 million key workers in their households can now book a coronavirus test online or through their employer. The move allows all essential workers in England to register for tests on the government's website. Thursday's figures show 23,560 tests were carried out, but Mr. Hancock said that capacity had now increased to 51,000 per day. The data shows that a further 616 people died of the virus in UK hospitals. You see, this is the problem with this current situation, is it's the fact that people are dying in hospital. It's not that they're dying, or they're not being treated. It's people are dying when they are being treated. That's what's crazy about the situation, isn't it? And what's even more worrying about these things is for me, is this backlash we're getting of these people starting to think, oh, well, actually, I think this is all a big conspiracy and I don't think it's real. Well, perhaps, and you know me, I'm the first one to love a conspiracy and the first one to look at things cynically and things like that, but I don't think in this regard that is going to help anyone. I think it's very, very silly to start doing this. And I think a lot of this comes from the fact that over the last couple of years, Trump and Boris and the subsequent governments around the world, not just them, but I think they are good examples of them, they've been trying to convince us that experts are stupid and that we shouldn't listen to them. And now they're actually... they're trying to make themselves out to be experts. I mean, Donald Trump keeps saying that I'm not a doctor, I'm a doctor. Well, why are you speaking then? Why are you coming up? All you are supposed to be doing, Donald, is you're supposed to be reciting what the experts are saying. He keeps saying, I'm not a doctor, but I can use common sense. Well, I don't want someone with common sense doing my surgery. I don't want someone with common sense doing my MOT on my car. I'd like someone who is trained in that field, please. I'd like someone who's trained in that field to be leading the most powerful country in the world, please. But if that's not available to us, then yeah, all right, you do what you want. That's okay. That you've been put in power. That's totally fine. But don't start coming out and saying ridiculous things like I'm not a doctor. But well, I have no opinion on it. Then I mean, it says here. What's this? US President Donald Trump has been lambasted by the medical community after suggesting research into whether coronavirus might be treated by injecting disinfectant into your body. Think about this, people. This guy's the most powerful man on the planet. What the hell are we doing? He's also appeared to improve irradiating patients' bodies with UV light. Why? Are we maybe just lick a frog? Lick a frog. Why not? Well, I found that if you try and ring, a secret message, ring a number, and you're completely cured. What is this? What is going on? Insane, absolutely insane. I just think it's strange that we're in a situation like this, isn't it? And this is external influences on businesses, definitely, because ultimately, we can't really affect it. Anyway, let's get away from the lockdown specifically, because it's frustrating, isn't it? But UK retail sales fell a record of 5.1% in March. Many stores shut down in the face of the coronavirus lockdown. The figures from the Office of National Statistics show that the steepest sales fall since it started collecting data in 1996. The food and online shopping rose as alcohol sales jumped by 31%, but clothes sales tumbled by 34%. Online shopping as a proportion of all retail reached a record high of 22%. Retailers are in crisis mode as the impact of COVID-19 has obliterated sales to new record lows, it says. But if you see, look, a little bit of data for us here, but it's to be understood. It's to be recognised. It's not something to be, well, it's something to be frightened of if you're in that industry, but it's something to be understanding the situation and going, well, you know what, it's something that we're gonna be able to control, and we are gonna be we're on it, aren't we? We're not ignoring it. So it is something that they are thinking. So it says swap clothes for alcohol. Yeah, well, you're not going to be buying out new clothes, are you? You can't all look as good as me all the time. But it's an interesting one. It's not like you're going to go to the thing is. I know that Asda were doing a ridiculous thing the other day, weren't they? Where they were saying they weren't going to pay we're going to pay the suppliers because people weren't buying stuff. That's not the way it works, Asda. That's not the way it works. Let's see what have we got. Treasury mulls over 100% guarantee on microphone loans. Why payday is different this month? Our wedding is cancelled, but we still have to pay. It's a big one, isn't it? Venues are forcing couples to pay big cancellation fees for wedding delayed by the lockdown. Well, not surely they can't, do they? These two look devastated, don't they? Sorry, I'm so callous, aren't I? I'm just we're just inundated with negativity all the time. It really is laugh or cry now, isn't it? I'll be in tears every day if I don't laugh, unfortunately. So I'm not having a go at them. I'm just, what can you do? Brides and grooms say that they are being charged thousands of pounds in cancellation and postponement fees on weddings that can't go ahead. While the majority of wedding companies across the UK have been flexible, a growing number of companies across the UK, couples across the UK have locked in a battle of venues to get their money back. Adam Gibbs, 36, and Sarah Summerskill, 33, from Working, told them that their dream day in May was sold off because of social distancing restrictions, but they would still have to pay the venue 80% cancellation surcharge. They've been planning the wedding. Well, surely not. I don't think that's true either. However, the venue has now cancelled the event and told them to pay a cancellation fee. No. They've been advised to claim the money back on their insurance. Well, no. That's ridiculous. I'd just say no. Sue me over it, because that's absolutely outrageous. You cancelled it, and you want me to pay for that. That's not happening. That's absolutely outrageous. So I think that they would have a very, very good standing in this in terms of contract law and things like that. I'd have to obviously look at the contract itself, and I'm not a law specialist obviously in this, but I can use common sense. Hey, do you want me defending you in court? It's probably not a good idea. It says some couples are unhappy with the options given to them. Blah, blah, blah. We saved so long and hard for it, and we only find out the wedding. But I mean, come on, 21 grand for a wedding. This is my point. I don't mean to be callous, but you're spending 21 grand on a wedding. Like, come on. They've also. I just think it's absolutely obscene, isn't it? The wedding package costs 17 grand. It's one day. You really don't have to spend that kind of money to get a good wedding. I promise you. Goodness me, and it makes me like difficult. It makes it difficult for me to be particularly nice to these people when this kind of thing is going on. Okay, we'll finish with this one. We'll finish off with a nice one, shall we? Some businesses will never reopen. Okay, let's have a look at this one. It says, when economies eventually reopen, many businesses will stay shut as they struggle with the new environment. This is the fear that the Global Disaster Recovery Group says that help businesses recover from crises like coronavirus. Small businesses owners will be more vulnerable and will have to become entrepreneurs again to survive. Restarting a business is much harder than shutting one down. When the economy reopens, it won't go back to how it was all once. Our habits may have changed. This is a really important thing. Remember, we talked about the recession. We talked about consumer spending habits. We talked about the confidence and the ability to, still purchase things and the want to buy things and things like that. So it is going to take some time, and it is going to be required that you are entrepreneurial, that you are innovative, that you are taking on. And there will be businesses that fall by the wayside, but that is what business is about, people. We know that, don't we? We know that most businesses fail. So it's a really, really horrible time, but this shows the power of the external environment. This is what happens to businesses sometimes. Thank you very much for joining me today. A little bit shorter than usual, but I hope it's been useful for you. Apologise to you because I'm sticking a little bit, but I will check it for tomorrow, and I'll mess around with it a little bit. I'll mess around with some settings and that, and make sure that it's not doing that, because that would be really frustrating. I would be wanting to smash my computer to bits, or I could have just said that it's your computer and it's not me that did it. I don't think it's me that did it, but it's definitely the output, because I can see it coming out differently. Peace and love. Stay safe. I will see you on Monday. Have a good one. Peace.